Being great at sales is essential to your business and your career, but you and I both know that the stress of selling and dealing with constant rejection can be an emotional drain. My entire brand, No BS Selling, is based on the belief that professional sales is a skill and not a personality, and that to be better at sales takes constant refinement and a dedication to your craft. This show is for salespeople and entrepreneurs who are committed to improving their sales skills and getting better results, and are sick and tired of the BS game that often happens between buyers and sellers. Welcome to the No BS Sales Podcast, and I'm your host, Walker McKay. I'll help you and your sales team make selling easier, feel less cheesy, and be more lucrative. It's time to change the rules and level the playing field between you and the people you sell to. You're already good. Let's be better.
Hey, No BS Sales Team. This week, we're going to go back to an oldie but a goodie, a conversation I had about a year ago with Vaughn Granger, who's an entrepreneur, business owner. You need to listen to this again because Vaughn's mindsets, the things he believes are extraordinary, and they're what helps make him such a success. Listen and see what you can take from it. See you next week.
LB is one of the owners of a men's clothing store in Columbia, South Carolina, and he's one of the best salespeople I know. And the reason I brought him on the show today was I want him to talk about sales and the very personal sales that he does. And also I want to hear about his perspective as an entrepreneur and somebody who's growing a business. So welcome, LB Granger, to the show. So glad you're here.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Glad to be on.
It's an honor and a privilege. And tell me something. Let's begin here. Tell me your story. What's the 3-minute version of how you got to where you are right now?
Let's see. I'm second generation clothier. So I work with my mother, my father, my brother, from the age of 6. You know, my father, I remember being at a market in Charlotte, and he said, Vaughn, you've got $6,000 or whatever it was to go buy merchandise for the store. And off I went. And so,
wow.
I said, yeah, I don't know what that says about here, but anyway.
So what does a 6-year-old do with $6,000 at a clothing mart? I mean, what did you buy?
The first thing I ever bought were Colonel Littleton knives and journal, like small leather goods.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Yeah. So
the book was set, right?
Yeah. So, you know, I couldn't go crazy, but I did that. And then, you know, Saturdays I'd come in and shine shoes and hang around the shop. And fast forward, you know, to 2001, I graduated high school. I went to the University of South Carolina on an academic scholarship. Still not 100% sure how. But after about 4 weeks of partying pretty solid, I realized that my 6-month allotment of cash that my mom and dad had given me was not going to cut it. And so I went back we have the clothing store in Columbia, South Carolina. So I come back one day and I sit down with my dad and I say, you know, Big V or Dad or whatever, I didn't tell him I was out of money. I said, I'd really like to get a job. And he said, absolutely. And so for 4 years, I worked in the shipping and receiving department at Granger Owings.
Yep.
I dated my high school sweetheart. She went to Clemson. And I went to school kinda. I worked in the back room in shipping and receiving. I always had a bartender, bouncer, catering job or something.
Yep.
And then always some little side hustle.
Yep.
Fast forward to 2000, like a week, no, not even a week, like 2 days before we went back to school for our senior year.
Yep.
And I decided that I wasn't going to take the LSAT. I had zero interest in being an attorney.
Is that what you thought?
I was having lunch.
As you were coming up, did you think you want to be an attorney? Is that the deal? Or is that
I wanted to be
your friends were doing, or what?
No, I either wanted to be a doctor or an attorney because they all made a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I just assumed. And then there's actually a guy I interviewed, or I don't know if it was interview. He was an attorney, and he said, Vaughn, why do you want to be an attorney? And I told him because I wanted to make a lot of money. And he said, there's a lot of broke-ass attorneys out there. Laughed, and I was like, okay. So I'm at lunch, and with my parents, and I said, guys, I'd like to come into the business. And what I mean by that is I just want to be a salesperson when I graduate college in a year from now. And they told me absolutely not. And I said, I'm not really asking permission for this. I'm telling you that I'm going to sell clothes, and I can either do it for you or I can do it for a competitor. You choose. And so
why do you think they said no?
Because they knew they wanted it to be my decision. They wanted me to do something that was quote unquote easier than what they had been doing.
Yep.
That same day, I called my father-in-law shortly thereafter, after they agreed to give me a job after college. I asked if I could meet him later that afternoon. I met with him. I asked him if I could marry his daughter.
Ah, got it.
I went and ran and got my grandmother who had passed away. I got her ring sized real quick for my wife's finger, or my girlfriend at the time. And then I proposed to my now wife at a Mexican restaurant because I couldn't take the suspense and almost threw up all over the place. And I had to pop the question because I was too afraid to do some elaborate scheme. So I had to do it all,
all
90% of my nature.
Asked for a job, got asked for permission, and got engaged in one day.
Yeah, never looked back. Some of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life in one day.
Awesome. I freaking love that.
So anyway, and now I own a couple different companies, and I think you and I started originally working together back in 2007-ish.
Wow.
And at that time, I was selling clothes on our floor, and you actually helped me negotiate my current partnership of being an equal partner with my father and another gentleman.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Because I love the story of how I met you, or how we kind of got to know each other. Full disclosure, I did not like you. I was an asshole, and I really thought you were an even bigger asshole than I was. And I always have this bar where if somebody's a bigger asshole than me, then that is clearly too much of an asshole, right? And so I didn't know you, but I knew about you. And I was afraid of your clothing store because I didn't know much about clothes and always felt a bit insecure about that. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and I was doing something. I remember exactly where I was. I was driving. I was near Trenham Road. And my phone rang, and I answered on a Sunday, and it was you. And you said, I think I need your help. And I kind of grinded my teeth. I'm like, really? And we talked for a little while, and we agreed to meet. And I said, I need to tell you something before we meet because I'm all about full disclosure. And you said, okay. And I said, I don't like you. And you said, I don't like you either, but I need your help to make my money. And so we started there. And it's funny, within 3 or 4 weeks, I was like, I freaking love this guy. He's one of my favorite people in the whole world. So anyway, it's been funny how that goes, how impressions kind of change. And anyway, so
that's awesome.
And you said that I helped you negotiate with your dad or with your partners. What was that about?
Yeah. So at that point, I'd been only, that time, I think I'd been, you had been coaching me for maybe, I don't know, I might have been 3 or 6 months in the deal, whatever it was. But you also got me to spend more money at one sitting than I've ever spent in my entire life.
You've about done that
now,
for me too.
Yeah. So anyway, I was like, damn, if you can talk me out of this much money, he's selling what I need to be buying. So, at that point, some interesting things had happened in our business. There were originally 3 partners. One of them had left to go off and do his own thing. And you just gave me guidelines to negotiate myself into an equal partnership with 2 other guys. I was coming in, 30 years less experience than either one of them. And the advice that I remember you giving me was you taught me how to put myself in their shoes and in their seat and understand what were some of their motivations, what were their aspirations, and then also what are some of their biggest fears. And then I also was very clear on what I wanted to accomplish. And then structured a deal in such a way that it was really, it got them where they wanted to go. It got me to where I wanted to go. It took care of and minimized a lot of their fears. Scared the crap out of me, but whatever. I was a young, dumb, aggressive guy. So I don't even think I still understand the implications of what I did. But anyway, it was just incredible. So it created a win-win for everyone. And that same strategy or template of doing business has remained very vital for me, 13 years, 14 years later.
What's the hardest thing about selling fine men's clothing?
Selling fine men's clothing is, it's tough because you're selling a commodity if you're selling a product. Yeah. And so, you can buy suits, from some people, you buy one, you get 18 free, whatever.
Yeah, right.
There've been a couple of SNL skits off of it, and it's always kind of funny. And I make light of it, but you can buy just about anything for any price nowadays if you're selling a product. So,
and your stuff, at least in Columbia, South Carolina, you're on the very high end. I mean, you're on the very high end in Columbia, and this is not a wealthy town where everybody's walking around and trying to spend $10,000 a year on clothes.
No. So the biggest challenge is you have to play a different game than anybody else is playing. So you can't compete on price because you'll lose. Yeah. And so what we do is, you have to teach our clients. You have to talk to them and help them understand it's a process, because, like you and I have been clients of one another off and on through time, and getting beyond, hey, I just need a white shirt because it's a white shirt, to, hey, you might want to think about buying these pants and this shirt because they all go together in your closet. And it's like, well, dang, that's nice. And on top of it, you don't have to, there's a secondary cost to that expertise.
Right.
It's just a value add free service. And but getting to that point of that exposure,
so how
and
do you
teaching
build
people
trust
that there's a different way.
I mean, ultimately, they're trusting you, right, with their reputation, their image. And so how have you learned to build trust with people, when they freaking walk in the store? I mean, that's I know a lot of your stuff is actually you're calling on people in direct sales, especially at this point, but, you also do retail. You're on the floor sometimes. How do you build trust with people quickly? What do you do?
To give you a great example, there was a guy that walked in the shop earlier today, never seen him before, nice looking guy. He comes in, he says, I need a sport coat, very direct. You can tell he doesn't really want me to help him. So I gave him immediately what he wanted, and I just started selling him sport coats. No budget, no why. I just gave him what he wanted for a second. And as we're trying on jackets, I just said, just out of curiosity, I introduced myself. I didn't do that on the front end because that's typical. Yeah. I waited until we were, 3 minutes into the conversation, and I said, oh, by the way, I'm Vaughn Granger. And he said, I'm so-and-so. And I said, why do you need another coat? You got one that looks fine on you. And next thing you know, he starts talking. And at that point, I just started asking questions. I said, oh, so what do you do? And he turns out he's in the educational world, and he asks people for money. So and I said, oh, so you're calling on people that have truckloads of cash, blah, blah, blah. You travel a lot. And so basically I took him through what we call a style dossier, and we figure out why he would be wearing clothes.
Yep. Other than being naked, it might be harder to raise the kind of money he's raising, maybe, depending upon his audience, right?
Right. And then, and then you find out what he's does for fun, and he's a t-shirt, blue jean kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, cool. I said, well, now that we kind of got that behind us, let me show you. You're looking at these jackets, but where do you normally buy clothes? So now I'm figuring out what his normal budget is without being too terribly direct.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I throw on a jacket, and I was like, I think that this would fit. And it was a little bit more of it fit his personality a lot better than what he was looking at. And he was like, damn, I really like this. But it was just asking questions and not making assumptions, and not being too forceful with it, and just understanding who they are, and then come up with a solution around that. And that's where I think, the expertise of knowing what the hell you're actually selling You can take those things and give a prescription for that problem.
Yep.
And that's, to me, that is rapport. That's,
and it's actually your seat, instead of pushing what it is you were trying to sell, it's kind of asking them what direction you wanted to go and then expertly guiding them that way. I think that's freaking awesome. And you do it. It's almost magical to watch you do it.
thank you.
What is it? You're one of the most, I'm going to call it driven, ambitious people that I know. And I'm curious, what is it that drives you? What is it that makes LV Granger just freaking have to win? What is it inside of you?
I believe that all of us are created in God's image.
Yep.
And because of that, I don't think God is mediocre. And I don't think we're called to be mediocre ourselves.
Yep.
And we all have gifts, everyone. Mm-hmm. And so my wife is a wonderful, wonderful mother and wife. And she stays at home, and I couldn't stay at home. I'm not built for that. But she's excellent at it, and she can connect with people in a different kind of way. I feel like my gift is to create opportunities for other people to achieve their dreams and their goals. And I love developing people, and that includes my children, that includes myself. And there's so many people who walk around on a day-to-day basis that seem like they're 50 shades of gray because they're just kind of going through the motions. And that's very sad to me. But then
I'm assuming you mean that more the color way than the sex book way. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's more the color way. You know, they lost all their spunk. So you get these people that are they're wonderful human beings. They have no drive. They're not chasing anything that's passionate to them, which is kind of overstated, but you got to have a dream.
Yeah. But
then when you get to see people chasing that, I don't know, I just love it. And I think if you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not, there's no such thing as maintaining.
Yeah.
And that just drives me every single day. And I figure I got a lot of people counting on me, and I don't know. It's in my DNA.
I want the No BS sales team to hear, what you're saying, which is, if you're not growing, you're dying. You have to have a challenge. You got to believe that you've got these certain gifts from God, and it's your job to go be better, right? It's your job, which is our saying right here, be better. Knowing that we're already good, but we need to be better, and that God expects more from us. And that you're living that. So let me dig into that just a little bit too. So what's the most, you mentioned you like helping people kind of reach their dreams and develop people to do that. Can you tell me a story about that?
Yeah, the one that really got me most recently, the one that really fueled my fire was there's a young lady that would work for me about 3 or 4 years. And we'd kind of hit a crossroads, and it was time for her to move on, and she did. And one of the companies I own is a company called Liam John. It's a direct selling company. And I had posted a job on LinkedIn or something like that said we were looking to add salespeople in Charleston, South Carolina. And her husband actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, Vaughn, would you be open to talking to, for this conversation, we'll just call her Molly."
Yeah.
And I said, "Sure, I'll be happy to talk to her." So me and my wife and he and his wife, we all go to dinner. And they were living in Columbia, and they wanted to move to Charleston and start a family. And I felt very convicted that was possible with the opportunity that I was presenting. So I said, "I think we can do this." And they had a couple concerns as to how to get there, and we addressed some of their, the potential obstacles that they saw with some strategies that I felt very confident would work. And if you fast forward a year after she came on board, they had moved to Charleston, and she was pregnant with their first child, a little boy who is named B for this conversation. But they were calling me and they were laughing. They were trying to come up with a name. And they were like, "We're going to throw Vaughn in there somewhere." And I was like, "Absolutely not." But just to hear the joy and to know that I didn't do anything other than give her the opportunity, and I created the vehicle, as I call it, with the company, and then also helped her, with strategy. But she did all the work. I mean, she executed on it. She took the coaching and everything that I was giving her, and she actually executed on it. And the next thing you know, they go from wanting to start a family living in Columbia to a year later having a family in Charleston, which is exactly what they wanted to do. And to see somebody else achieve one of their dreams and goals,
how does that make you feel?
That was it.
How does that make you feel when you realize that you've helped somebody do that?
That is, I never did cocaine, but I'm pretty sure it feels like what some people think cocaine's like. I mean, it's just I think now you're like, shit.
I think it's healthier and
yes, it's much healthier. It's not quite as bad as burn.
Long-term strategy. That's hilarious.
No, I love it, and that's all I needed. And as soon as I got to witness it and be a part of it, I was like, this is what I really think I was created for. So from there, I hadn't looked back.
So what's advice now that you would give to yourself, your 10-year younger self? What's something that you know now that you wish you had known 10 years ago that might have made a difference in your life?
Let's see. That's 10 years ago. I had no children, or one that was just born.
Yep.
I always wanted to be successful, but up to a certain point, because I didn't want to necessarily make people around me uncomfortable.
Yep.
And I defined a lot of the way that I saw success through other people's definition of success. I mean, I have wonderful parents that.
Can I unpack that for a second? Because I think
absolutely.
Something that a lot of us salespeople deal with is struggle with success at our own terms, right? And you said your concern was making other people uncomfortable with your idea of success. Tell me, what does that mean? Tell me a little bit more about that.
I just think for me personally, I come from a modest background. I grew up on a horse farm. I was hard work, dedication, consistency. We used the term small business a lot as I was growing up, and the value system and he's a wonderful man, and I've learned wonderful things about him, but the way that my father defines success, he's very family oriented. He would tell you that he slept in his bed, 348 nights out of the year, and the other ones were on vacation with his family, and he takes a lot of pride in that.
Yep.
So if I say that I want to fly around on a private jet, that's a stark contrast from how he defines success.
Correct.
And so just getting comfortable with that, and then status quo. So in our world, 10 years ago, in the shop that I was in, the top producer sold $1 million, and he had been with the company 25 years before he did that.
Wow.
And everybody else was like a $500,000 to $650,000 a year producer.
Wow. So
it's like, okay, there's a path, what it's going to take to get there, blah, blah, blah. But back in 2013, after a very interesting conversation with my wife on a date night, I made a decision that I was going to quit half-stepping, and I was going to be $1 million producer. And at that time, I was selling $50,000 a month in clothes.
Okay. Yep.
And but I was like, I'm not waiting 20 years because that sounds like a losing proposition.
Yeah.
And so I just said, I'm going to do it. And then I did it. And within 90 days of making that commitment, I was tracking the $1 million pace. And it just took me too long to do that because it made other people uncomfortable. They said, oh, well, you don't know enough people, or you're too young to call on that many people, or whatever.
What was the
BS is?
Because there's some shit there. So when you make a commitment, this is an interesting thing. In one of my former lives, I was in the commercial real estate business, and I was medium to low successful in that, for the majority of that. And I had a guy that I worked with, and he was very successful, about my age, been in business the same amount of time. And I was whining to him about why I wasn't more successful. And he said, it's because you're not committed. And he said, once you commit to something, you'll be fine. And I was like, shit. And I didn't understand that fully at the time, but I totally get it now. So when you committed, what changed?
When I committed to it, the difference was it wouldn't say, the language changed from saying, if I could only to win. And then probably the biggest shift as it relates to sales specifically is when you make that commitment, everything that happens from that point forward must advance you to that outcome. And that means that if you have a sale that goes well, you learn from that and you celebrate it. And if you have one that hits you in the face and falls through, you learn what you could have done differently next time, so that when you get the next opportunity, it wasn't a wasted exercise. And so you're always, and hope and have faith that you're going to reach that outcome. And everything is developing you to that point. And that's so much different because you're going to get there.
So how in the hell do you, so what is, and I totally get that, right? Because the stuff that comes up, it no longer stops you because you realize, okay, this is something, I got to go around it. This is a thing. It's a speed bump. It's a whatever. And so what, So what changed? Because my guess is to go from $50,000 a month to, I'm not very good at math, but $80,000 a month took a change in your behavior, right? And what you did every day. What did that look like? Do you remember?
Especially initially, I remember I set out metrics as to what I did is I grabbed as much data as I could, like controllable activity. Like what are things that because you can't control whether or not somebody buys or not, or how much they buy.
Correct.
There's activities. So like I could control how many phone calls I made every day.
Yep.
And I could control with how many how many people I got in touch with, because after a while you notice an average ratio there.
Yep.
And so I remember exactly, how many dials, how many reaches, how many appointments set, how many appointments kept, how many did appointments bought, how much did they buy, and how many referrals I get. Wow. And I had to make no less than 300 phone calls a week.
Wow.
And I just, for literally 12 months, I tracked that data every single day of my life.
Yep.
And I watched those numbers and I watched my ratios, and I tracked it in a spreadsheet. And I knew that every time I picked up the phone, even if I misdialed a guy's phone number, I knew that it was worth X number of dollars or pennies to me or whatever it was, that it still counted. It was like money in the bank. And I knew that if I walked into every appointment, I just created a system. But I got real focused on it. So and that was hard because initially I didn't have the capacity. Like it's kind of like running a marathon. You go from making like 15 phone calls a week to 300. That hurts really bad. And not asking to referrals to expecting to get 90 a week, like things change. Like you got to go in, like you got to learn a different skill set. So like time management, then that like changed everything. You had to learn time management.
Yeah.
You had to learn that calling in the morning was better than calling in the middle of the day, so that you could catch that ratio. So maybe that 300 comes down to
both are better than not calling at all.
Absolutely. So, it just changed all that stuff. And after, like initially it sucked and it hurt, but then like even today, I don't run into someone that's well dressed without introducing myself and just asking what the hell they do. Why? Because I had to find a way to get 90 referrals a week. Like that's just easy now.
Man, this is such a great conversation. I could talk to you all day, but I'm not sure people listen all day. Can I share with you what I've learned? Can I tell you what I've learned in this session?
It's a couple of things. One is that you got to identify your passion and what it is that you love and why you're doing what you do. And you've done such a nice job of that, building a business so that you can help other people reach their dreams. I just think that's cool as hell. I also love your comment about commitment, about the dinner you had with your wife and said, I'm going to stop half-assing this and going to go full speed. And the difference that made, and the difference that it made was you fixed what you could control, which is your behavior, which is what you tracked, the dials you made, the meetings you had, you kept the ratios and you worked on the ratios because those are things you can control. That's magnificent. It's great for the No BS sales team. Hear that it is in your behavior. This is not luck why people get successful, right? It is hard fucking work. And you got to do the work or it doesn't happen. Or let me tell you this, you can spend 50 years of your career making the $10,000 you got to make, or you can do it in 5 or 2. You just got to pick, right? So, Vaughn, how would somebody get in touch with you if they wanted to find you? How would they reach you?
Yeah, you can find me. So I'm terrible with Facebook. I don't know. My wife's very good at Facebook. I'm awful at it. You can find me on Instagram at Vaughn Granger.
Spell that.
And VAUGHNGRANGER. And then my personal email is Vaughn@VaughNGranger.com.
Okay. Awesome. I want to thank you so much for being a guest today. It's been really fun having this conversation. I think that the whole No BS sales team there's so many lessons to learn here. It's great. If somebody in the audience wants information about the No BS Sales School, go to www.nobssaleschool.com or hit me up on Twitter at Walker McKay. If you want to find out where other people are screwing up sales, go to www.7salesmistakes.com. No BS sales team, I love you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Walker.
See you next week. Thank you, Vaughn. You the man. Appreciate you, buddy.
See you guys.